Welcome to Voice It, a podcast showcasing people in the Clare Valley and the mid-north of South Australia who've started their own businesses from scratch and have turned them into success stories. This is a chance for them to tell you their story. I'm your host, Annabelle Homer. Today you'll meet Brian McInerney, one of the founding fathers of one of the top insurance brokerages in Australia. He's the M in MGA Insurance.
We're looking for someone else to work in the insurance. I said, I know anything about insurance, mate. He said, no, we teach you, you'll learn, etc., etc. And then he started to tell me about the commissions that you got paid. There was no salary, you just worked on commissions. It's a pretty big risk when I think about it now, because in the end I decided, all right, I'll have a go and I'll do it.
In this episode, of course, we'll talk about MGA's astronomical growth from humble beginnings back in 1975 to now over 65,000 clients and a branch network across Australia and one in Cambodia. But we'll also find out more about Brian's background, his humble beginnings growing up in Melrose with his brothers, his love for footy and tennis, a high school stint at Sacred Heart College at Glenelg, and then doing an apprenticeship as a fitter and turner working for BHP at Iron Knob and Iron Barron near Whyalla. So how does a fitter and turner end up in insurance, to then running one of the biggest insurance brokerages in Australia? Well, you'll have to listen. It's an inspirational tale, a rags to riches story. He's now 80 years old and retired from MGA, but he still sits on the board. Enjoy the journey with Brian McInerney.
Well, I was born on the 1st of December 1941, born in the Port Pirie Hospital. My mother at the time was working in a hotel at Port Germain, which is close to Port Pirie. Her sister and her brother-in-law owned the hotel, but she actually lived in Melrose itself. So that's the reason I lived in Melrose but was born in Port Pirie.
Port Pirie. Tell me about your life in Melrose.
I'd say I had a pretty good childhood. Melrose is a small town at the base of Mount Remarkable. I was there from year 1 to year 7 at school. We spent most of our weekends climbing the mount. It was just one of those small country towns in those days, quite safe. We would leave in the morning on a weekend, say after breakfast, and head down to the creek and head up the mountain. We wouldn't come back till dark that night. Nobody came looking for us. Nobody worried about us. We just turned up when we got hungry.
So how did your family come to be living in Melrose? What's the history there?
My mother was a Melrose person. She was in a family, I think, of about 9 children. There was quite a few of them. My father lived on the York Peninsula, just out of Moonta. From what I can gather, he was a mechanic. He shifted to Butte, which is down the road from Moonta, to work, and then he got a shift to Melrose as a motor mechanic working for one of the garages, or the garage in Melrose. And I guess the rest would be history. That's where he met Mum. And
you had 4 siblings?
I did, 4 brothers. I was born in 41. Vincent, my older brother, was born in 39. He died in 42. From what we can gather, and again, they didn't talk a lot, but we do gather it was from a brain tumour. So that's about all that I do know.
So he would have been about 3 years old?
He was about 2 years old.
2, 3, oh wow, 2 years old.
40, 41, about 2 years old, yes. So I then became the oldest, and there was 4 boys then, no girls in our family. So my mother had 5 boys. Then my brother Bill, or William, but we called him Bill, Dennis and Terry.
So you were the eldest after Vincent passed away. You would have been about 1.
I would have been, yes.
And did they ever talk about Vincent?
Oh, yes, a lot. Yeah, my mother did all the time. We got photos of him everywhere, and yeah.
That would have been hard for your mum.
Oh, it would have been. I mean, now when you get older and you think about it, it would have been very hard. Probably as a small kid, I didn't think that way. I didn't really understand it all, I guess. And also, but he died. This was during the war years when Dad probably was away quite a bit, so that would have made it worse at the time, I would think.
Even though you were only 5 when he returned, but you were pretty much the man of the house.
Yes, yeah, I would have been.
For a while,
yes.
You know, milking the cows and helping your mum.
Yes, yeah.
And did that continue? Did you continue to do that once he was back?
Yes, yeah, really I did, yeah. I guess.
So you're quite independent from quite a young age. Do you think that set you up for the rest of your life?
I have no doubt. I presume that when you're young and you're down on your own 2 feet, I just presume it continues. I think that'll be a pretty natural thing. If you're not dependent on anybody earlier on, you just continue on that way. It didn't do me any harm, put it that way.
You went to the local primary school?
Yes.
How many children were at that school?
My guessing is about 60.
60 kids?
That's what I'm thinking. In my class, there's probably about 10 from memory, so I guess every class might have had roughly about that.
And you were ducks in grade 7?
Yes, I'd forgotten about all those things. I found that in a little book the other day, they give you a little sticker and it just said ducks to the school, 19, whatever it was. From grade 1 to grade 7 in Melrose School, you had 2 rooms. The first room you were in grade 1 to 3, and then the big room, when you graduated to the big room, you were in from grade 4 to 7. And there was 3 of us. There was myself and a good friends of mine, Dennis Lee and Bob Hunt, and we were first, second and third every year of that whole school life. We rotated between being first, second or third. I think the only year I can recall that I wasn't was in year 4 when we went from year 3 into the big room. I must have had stage fright or something because I wasn't that first year, then got back into the year first, second or third, and then obviously ducks to the school in grade 7.
Did you enjoy school?
Oh, yeah, I didn't. I can't even remember not liking school.
And what was it about school that you liked the most?
I would say probably all the other kids, couldn't say I was mad about study and lessons and schooling, but I wasn't brilliant, but I just always did enough to get through.
And when did sport really make its mark on your life?
I would say as a kid, it's like all kids. See, I was unlucky because I lived in Melrose and I'm envious of the kids these days because they've got your footy with all your Colts and your junior Colts. We didn't have any of that. There was no Colts team where I was. I was the mascot for the A-grade footy team because I loved footy. I think in year 7 I was captain of the school footy, but we only played other schools now and again. It was no big deal. It wasn't like a weekly event where you're playing for a grand final or anything like that. So because I played a lot of tennis because tennis was available, but footy wasn't.
Did you enjoy tennis?
Yeah, hell yes. Played in all the Easter tournaments and all of those things. I can remember doing that as a kid.
Sacred Heart College, heading down there in the age of 13 or 14.
Yes.
Can you remember that feeling when you first arrived and leaving the family home?
Never forget it. It was awful. Awful, because the reason being, I guess, probably the longest trip I'd ever been on, which car, like my parents took me down to Sacred Heart, January I think it was, got introduced, shown it, first time I'd been there, shown around the place, met everybody, met these brothers all walking around these black dresses, uniform thing. I'd never come across a lot of all this type of thing. Then my parents left, said, see you later, drove off. So there I am in a school where I come from a school that might have had 60 kids. Here's a school with 600. Probably not that many at that stage with the boarders. That was the day schools as well. But with the boarders, there's literally hundreds of them, though. And I didn't know anybody. Yeah, I was in the most foreign environment you could ever imagine, I think. And the first few weeks, and even from my memory, the first few months being a boarder, I can remember at night laying in that bed and no one would hear me, but just crying myself, in the bed. I can remember just that sad feeling, missing all the stuff at home and probably my mother's cooking, who knows what it was, but probably all of those kind of things. Because the reason being is that the only time you got to go home was school holidays. So you dropped off in January, didn't go home till May. And then May, you didn't go home till September, and in September you went home for Christmas. So it was a long gap. Nowadays when they go to college, kids just up and down every weekend or come home to play footy or whatever. It's just and trip to Adelaide's nothing, you do it. But once I got over all of that, then I loved it. I didn't want to go home. It changed completely. I came home at May for the holidays, and then the only way then I had to go back in the train. So I had to catch the train at Melrose. It went to Gladstone. You changed the trains at Gladstone, got on the big train that took you to Adelaide. I can remember sitting in the carriage of the train in Melrose as it left the station and going towards Gladstone, and I'd watch Mount Remarkable until it became the size of just a thing in the distance. I would watch the whole mountain just disappear until it's gone.
How long did it take you to train down from Melrose to Adelaide?
I can't recall, but it was quite a while because you're changing trains, and the trains, you're getting onto the Broken Hill Express, it was called, I think, the one that came down from Broken Hill, went through Burra, Gladstone. I think we then got on and changed at Riverton. No, maybe Riverton was where the cafeteria was. But I can remember distinctly with the train slowing down there to the cafeteria, and you'd look out of the train door and there were people jumping off of the train, running along next to it. It was a pretty dangerous habit in those days. There was no rules and regulations about any of that stuff. And you look out and you ended up doing the same thing yourself. You wouldn't wait for the train to stop. You'd just pile off and everyone's just running along the station platform.
What were some of the highlights from your time at Sacred Heart?
Oh, when I got to Sacred Heart, it was incredible because you got there to play footy, you played cricket, you played tennis. I played baseball, never heard of it before I went from Melrose. Swimming, we lived right on Somerton Beach. I was in the Army Cadets. The biggest shock probably was the size of the classes. I was no longer first, second or third in the class.
I was going to say, how did you go scholastically?
I went all right, but no, that we had brilliant people in there. When I think back, I must have got it pretty easy in Melrose, I think, to get the results I got. But, yeah, it was a big shock to have that means there was 70, 80 in one class, which was more than my whole school. Being in the cadets, I was one of those in 1954, I think, when the Queen came out. We had to line up in our uniform with our 303 rifles, which was taller than me. I always think of that, kids at that age carrying bloody big guns around. And so we lined up when the Queen came out, something that never ever would have happened if I'd stayed in Melrose. We had to line up and stand there at ease for hours upon hours upon hours and not allowed to move. That was certainly a highlight.
Did you know what you wanted to do once you finished school?
No, not really. I think what happened was I went to Whyalla. Jobs were available, and in Whyalla, everybody worked at BHP.
So when did you leave Sacred Heart?
1956. So in 57, I would have been in Whyalla.
You left at the end of grade 10?
Yes. And because there was work available, everybody in Whyalla in those days probably left about then. A lot of people, they wanted to be the doctors, the dentists, and go on. Of course, they went on to leaving honours, or year 12. But other than that, I would say most of the people I know in Whyalla all took trades at BHP.
So you didn't want to be a doctor or a dentist or a lawyer?
No, I had no interest in any of that. Probably not even too sure about a fitter and turner. I think the jobs are all there, and they said pick one, take one. Can't distinctly remember why I would have thought why a fitter and turner. I've got a feeling there's a bit of probably pressure maybe from a father to say, right, we'll get a job and here they are and this would be a good one, try this one. And that's probably what I did because I eventually got away from it. Did my apprenticeship 5 years.
And who was that with?
That was a crowd called CA Parsons of Australia. They used to make turbines. They used to make a lot of things for the shipbuilding and for the ships. So a lot of the stuff we made was fitted into the boats. I remember one year I went out on sea trial. So when a boat was launched, big thing in Whyalla in those days when they had a boat launching, they used to launch the boat in Whyalla itself, massive big ships. Because we did work on them and supplied some of the materials for the ships, we got to go on the sea trials. So I remember being on the boat when they launched it and we went out into the Gulf and sailed up and down all day.
So sea trials as in testing out the boat
yes,
to make sure it didn't
we had
to make sure it didn't sink.
Yes, yeah, that's exactly right. We had to make sure all of the boilers, the turbines, all of the things that we provided were working.
That's pretty cool.
It was great. It was sensational. Just be involved in something like that was so good. And it was probably even better to find the stuff you made work. That was a big relief. So I spent my apprenticeship at Parsons, and at the end of my apprenticeship, I then went to work at BHP for a couple of years. I'd done my apprenticeship, wanted to move somewhere else, so I went over to BHP, and I got a job then working with them as a fitter, and shifted up to a place called Mount Iron Knob and Iron Barron, which are places out of Whyalla. Pretty scary up there because in Iron Knob, you've got to bear in mind in Whyalla in those days, we had people from all nationalities living. Migrants brought overseas to help the workforce here, brought from overseas. Iron Knob, we lived in the single men's quarters, so it's all single men. There was, you name a country and there was somebody there from there, and there's a lot of the countries that fight overseas. Those people were all in Iron Knob. So you'd have Yugoslavs and Polish and people that didn't like each other. And I can remember a lot of nights up there just in my little room with the door locked and hearing these fights. And one guy one night came in with an axe trying to chop the door down of I don't know whether they were Yugoslavs. I think they were. They're having some big war over something. And we had a lot of trouble like that. It was pretty scary. So I did all my night shift work. So you do day shift, afternoon shift and night shift. We worked on the big steam shovels, these massive big shovels that dig the iron ore out of the ground, loaded onto the trains. So we used to have to pull them all down and put them all back together again. Now, huge job.
Just to paint a picture, what was the population of Iron Knob back in those days? I mean, how many people were living in the men's quarters?
I'd have to have a guess and say probably a couple of hundred. The town itself, the Iron Knob locals, they'd be lucky if there was 50.
And what about Whyalla? Was it just a bustling, booming metropolis back in those days in the 1950s?
It was. It was big, far bigger than Melrose. There's no doubt about that. It was a shock to my system to live in a town that size, but it was. And over the years it got bigger than it is now. Mm. It's actually gone backwards in numbers, even though it's progressing okay at the moment.
Where's Iron Barron?
It's the Iron Ore mountain range, so it's not far down the track. It's just another big hill and the next big hill. It's only a few k's down the road.
Oh, right. So how long did you work out there for?
A couple of years.
Did you like that type of work?
No, not really when I think about it now. I remember working on that night shift up on that mountain, freezing cold. I was the fitter and I had one assistant with me and we were up there all night in that freezing cold working away. No, I don't think I enjoyed it at all.
What was your wage?
I got £4, 2 and 6. I can remember that. For some reason, it always stuck in my mind. But nowadays, that's like about $10. In today's comparison, things nowadays you pay 40 or 30 or 40. Things like then were like a shilling, 12, 10 cents. But so you got to realise it's a long time ago. But I still don't think I weren't getting paid a fortune.
With that wage, could you afford to live on that independently?
Yes,
you could.
I must have because, again, in those days, a lot of us had motorbikes because cars were too dear. So a lot of us had motorbikes, obviously could afford to have one of those.
So what was your first motorbike?
It was an old Triumph. I don't even know if they make them these days. An old 250cc Triumph, but everybody had a motorbike. That was just the way it was. We were like bikies in those days in Whyalla, not real bikies. So.
Did you have a leather jacket?
Yes. Oh, absolutely, yes. Hell, you had to have a leather jacket. The thing about Whyalla, it used to get very hot at nights, and a lot of my mates, we all had bikes. We used to line up at night time in the bikes and all meet. Then we'd ride around the town, so we were in a big group and a lot of noise. We used to go down outside the police station, park, stop, pull up, all rev our bikes up, and then all take off. Cops would come out, they'd chase. I think they enjoyed it as well. One cop told me years later that he said, we had more fun than you blokes. They would chase us all over the place. I remember once we went down on the beach, they followed us in the paddy wagon, and there's a big dip in the sand. They went down, they got bogged. So we all parked our bikes, went down and pushed the cops out, and then got on the bikes and took off. And they chased us again. So I'm thinking, we thought we were being really, really bad people. So I think the cops were having a ball. My favourite spot was on top of halfway up the hill. It's a big bush, and you could actually ride your bike into the bush, just sit in it. And I was sitting up the hill in the bush, and the cops pulled up and just pulled up outside the bush and said, how's it going in there? So I realised then that they were smarter than we were. Yeah.
Sounded like you were a bit of a devil.
No. It was just you made your own fun. I think that's what it was all about. You just made your own fun in those days, and there were just things to do. And we had a lot of fun doing that kind of stuff. It was pretty harmless, really. Yeah. In those days, there was a guy working for MLC Life Insurance, and life insurance was a big thing in those days. Everybody took out life insurance. A lot of people had a pay by the month, and it was a collector type system where this person would go around every month to all of these people, collect all their premiums, and upgrade everything they've got, sell them more or whatever they needed. People had babies, they needed to insure the kids. Everybody took out insurance in those days. And life insurance was a huge thing. If they died, they got all this money paid to them, et cetera, et cetera. And I was thinking about leaving, and I was going to put in for a job in Geelong. It was a place called Alcoa. They were looking for fitters over there, and I was looking at that thinking, should go and do something or try something else or go somewhere different. Don't ask me why, whether was Jan going to go with me it didn't eventuate. But I told this guy that was collecting my insurance that this could be the last one because I'm thinking of heading off. He said, what are you going to do? I said, I don't know. I'm thinking about doing this. I honestly don't. When I think back now, I don't think I was going anyway.
Feeling the waters.
Yeah, I think so. And he said to me, we're looking for someone else to work in the insurance. I said, I know anything about insurance, mate. He said, no, we teach you, you'll learn, et cetera, et cetera. And then he started to tell me about the commissions that you got paid. There was no salary. You just worked on commissions. It's a pretty big risk when I think about it now, because in the end I decided, all right, I'll have a go and I'll do it. So I left that job, went into insurance, took over or helped this guy, went out, started collecting his premiums, selling people insurance. And I don't know what happened, but it's where I probably learnt a lot of things in that business, I guess, sales skills, that type of thing. I did all right at it. That's why the new car, because I was earning some decent money. All my mates were still working at BHP, still getting paid every fortnight, but if I sold more, I got more. So I put more time into it and become quite successful at it.
How long did it take you to get your head around life insurance? And
obviously not long, because I was only doing it a couple of years. What we used to also do then is that people used to insure their house and their contents and their cars. So that was general insurance. And a life insurance company used to have a general insurance company as their, they used to collect the money from these people and then pay it to the general insurance company, and then they'd pay a portion of that, I guess. And the general insurance bloke used to call once a month and collect all of the premiums I'd collected for that whole month. And he said they were looking for somebody in Port Pirie and there was a car supplied. I know to this day the only reason I joined is they supplied a car. There's no other reason whatsoever. I remember going home thinking, all was in my head was car supplied, car supplied. They didn't tell me it was an old bomb of a car.
I was going to say, what type of car?
No, it was an old Kingswood, but it was old brown. I mean, it was just terrible. But anyway, I ended up making enough money to buy a car myself, and I took this job. I went to Pirie just before the year before we got married in 66. That was 65. So I went to Pirie, then we got married, and then Jan moved straight to Port Pirie. That's where we went. And also the place we rented, we had no, you know how people talk about, I love all this because you say, oh, back in my days it was so tough. Well, back in my days it was so tough. Our first table was, you know, on those fold-out card tables? That was. I mean, people laugh and think you're making the stories up, but that was we borrowed some chairs and had a card table for a table and board bed and some furniture and stuff like that, but a lot of it was just borrowed stuff, and that's how you start off in those days. I often think back about that. Jan won the Yacht Club raffle, $400. That was like a fortune to us. It was just magic. So we sort of basically started off for that $400 that she won in a Yacht Club raffle. Went from there. Often think about from then till now, just how did all this happen? I got to not like life insurance because I had a lot of pressure from the MLC people who were real salesmen to force sell on people, and I was the other way around. I used to always look at things, if I didn't want to do it, why would someone else like to? If I didn't want to have somebody shoving this down my throat, why would they? I was probably not meant to do that type of thing, that high-pressure sales. When I took the leap and went on to the foreign general side, which we ended up doing for the rest of my life, there is no sales. The stuff you're insuring on the foreign general side is the stuff that people have to have insured. They get a car, they want to insure it. They get a house, they get their contents, they get a boat, they get a caravan. They're coming to you, can you insure this? You're not going to them and saying, hey, can I sell you caravan insurance? They want it. It's not a matter of, you don't have to sell it to them. So I guess I like that side of it. I was in business providing a service, but not forcing things down people's throats. Life insurance I found was, you're trying to talk people into things. And in some cases with these high-pressure guys that used to come up and give me the sales lessons as to how to get your foot in the door and don't leave till you've made a sale, I couldn't handle it, didn't like it.
So when you were in Port Pirie, which areas did you cover?
Yeah, big area then, because Pirie I did from right up north to Maree and probably west across to Kingunya. Big area.
I can imagine you'd meet a lot of people in that job.
I know people everywhere. I really do. And more so than just that, because since then on the MGA side, I guess we've had conferences. I've been overseas with them, and I know people in every state. Austbrokers alone, the mob that we belong to, there's 40 branches, not our 40 branches, but they've got 40 brokers involved, and I've been overseas with all those people. All those people come from different places in Australia, so you've met a lot of people, no doubt about that.
And Pirie, living in Pirie, did you enjoy that?
Loved it. Pirie is an incredible place. From an outsider, if you just drive in, drive through, drive by, you think, what's this place? But I noticed it was different, say, coming to Clare. But in Pirie, all the years I was there, I don't know how many, if very few people ever said that question. I mean, a lot of people knew what I did, but the other people who didn't ever said, oh, what do you do for a living? Where that depends what your answer was, where you sort of stood with the social whatever. Didn't bother in Pirie. I can remember at the footy club up there with a bloke from one of the high knobs in the BHAS up there, which is a big deal in Pirie. It's a bit like BHP and Whyalla. And I don't think in all those years we were having a beer, I even knew he was the big knob in Pirie. He'd never mentioned it. And it's just that kind of a place. When we came to Clare, Jan couldn't get over it. She said everywhere she went, everyone said to her, oh, what does your husband do? Back in those days, Clare was snobby. It's changed now because no one comes from Clare here anymore. Everyone's outsiders. I mean, in those days when we first came here, all the shops shut at 5 o'clock, and I'd say, well, there's nothing open for the visitors. Oh, we don't want them here, rubbernecks. There was a lot of that attitude. It was all just for the Clare people. Yeah, it's just a bit of a difference. No one in Pirie did that. It was a great town to live in.
When you moved to Clare, when Stephen was 5 months old, and you took up the area manager role, when did you decide to really get out on your own, and why did you do that?
probably was 7 years here, I think, from memory, 72, 79, yeah. What I was doing was good. I think basically I wanted to work for myself because I saw a couple of friends of mine that were doing something similar. Insurance broking wasn't, certainly in the country, it wasn't hardly even heard of. But I just wanted to get out, work for myself, and I was thinking about this, how do I get into this broking? Because when you're working for one company, you're only restricted to what kind of business they do. So I was starting to run into a lot of people that are thinking to myself, God, if I could do their business if I could do it with someone else, but I work for this company, they won't do it, so I can't do it. And to say to people, no, I can't help you, I didn't like that. I was realising then that the brokers who could deal with any company could say, yes, I can help you. I'll go and find the market and see where it is and I'll get you the best deal. So I was starting to look into a little bit about broking and thought then, well, I'm in Clare. All the brokers that I knew of were in Adelaide, so I had to have a connection with them, and it's just the way fate works. When I was in Pirrie, there's a guy called John George who worked for opposition to me. Sorry, this is the other friendly part about Pirrie. He was the opposition, but do you know that every Friday night, all of us from the different insurance companies would meet in the family hotel and we'd all have Friday night drinks together. Then we'd go out for the rest of the week. We're all against our enemies. But every Friday we'd all meet in the pub. So it was the kind of place Pirrie was. So there was a guy up there called John George who worked for one of the other companies, South British. And one day I stepped out of my office in Clare in the main street and John was walking past the office. And the old story, John, right, hey, what are you doing? Haven't seen you for a long time. And I said to John, what are you doing here? He said, I'm just heading back to Pirrie, back to go and see. He was going to look up a few old friends, old clients, and see if he could get them to start dealing with him. And he said, what are you doing? And I said, no. I said, I'm working for New Zealand Insurance. But I said, I'm looking, I said, I want to get into broking. And he said, well, that's what I'm doing. I said, well, come inside and sit down. Let's just tell me what you're doing and what's going on. And he said, I wouldn't mind expanding out of what I'm doing and doing something in the country. He said, so that's why I'm going back to Pirrie to see if there's any opportunities up there, because he's got a lot of old clients that, and same thing, we all know a lot of people up there, and so did he. And he thought if he went back up there, could start something there, he could perhaps expand his business. Because when he ran into me, we sat down, we talked for all day. At the end of the day, I said, mate, that's it. I said, I need a contact in Adelaide. You need somebody in the country. I said, it's just worked itself out. And that's how it started. We shook hands on the footpath. I came out and said to Jan, I'm leaving my job.
What did she say?
She said, who's going to pay you? I said, nobody. Because nobody was. We're going to work for ourselves. And at that stage, I didn't have a client. Yeah, I know. You do some silly things when you think about it in life, but sometimes you just, I know, in your head somewhere you know there's something there. You just got to work it and get to that point, I guess.
So how long did it take you to really gain momentum?
It's probably an MGA story, this one, because it's a bit involved as to how all that happened. So I can tell you now.
Well, when you and John, in those early days, just the two of you, when did you start making some money? Oh,
probably a year. What happened was the company I worked for, New Zealand Insurance, when they found out I was leaving and going into broking, their first thought was, he's going to be a broker. He's going to take all our business and walk away with it, which nowadays they've outlawed that type of thing happening, and so they should. So I had the manager in Adelaide rang me up, and his first words on the phone were to me, he said, if you think you're going to leave and take any of our business, he said, we will fight you in the courts. He said, if you try. I said, Ron, slow down. I remember saying to him, I said, just slow down. I said, what are you talking about? I'm not going to take any of your business. I said, I'm going out to broking. I said, you're the only company I know. I said, the odds are I'm probably going to do all of your business, all with you, and give you some more. That's the way it works. Anyway, so I'm coming up to see him. When he got here, he drove up from Adelaide. When he got to my office, he must have been stewing in a car. He got in, his face was red. He was angry, like he opened the door and came straight in and straight into me about, if you do this, and we'll do this, and if you do that, we'll do this. So I remember just sitting there letting him carry on for a while, and we ended up, he sat down and calmed down, and I said to him exactly the same thing again. I said, I will place all that business back with you. I said, I don't know any other companies yet. I said, and if I find new business, guess who's going to get it? I said, you guys. I said, you're going to... So in the end, he agreed. He said, all right. He said, but what we want you to do, he said, you've got to go out, and he made me go out and rewrite every bit of business we had, like physically go and see every client, every householder, everybody who insured a motor car, everyone had a caravan. I had to go and see all those people and rewrite all new documents out, a whole lot. I would never do it again. I spent a whole year, Jan will tell you, literally working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When you're a broker and a lot of people insure their houses and cars, you never get to meet a lot of them because they're just domestic householders who might call into the counter and insure their house, their car and their boat. and go. I don't get to see them unless something happens. They have a claim, I'll go and see them, whatever. So I had all these people I'd never met, had to go and see them all and sit down and tell them this is what I'm doing, and have to rewrite. It was bad. So it took us a year, but at the end of the year, then some money started coming in, and we got off the ground and went from there.
How does it actually work? You charge a brokerage fee to the actual company that you're trying to bring business in for?
What happens is, a lot of people get confused about this. A lot of people are frightened to deal with a broker because they think we're going to charge the insurance plus we're going to charge a broker fee. What we do is we go out and get the best deal for the client, and out of that premium, the insurance company pay us a commission out of it. So we don't go out looking for the dearest premium because it's going to earn us more commission. What you're doing is try and get the best deal for your client, and out of that, we get paid. And the reason you don't worry about how much I wouldn't even know what we get for every transaction you do. It's just the total amount at the end of the year. I mean, if the more work you do, the more you get. But the more you can do a better deal for your client, the more clients you're going to get. So it works that way.
So when you were in business with John, that was called Mid-North Insurance Services.
That's how we started. My first business on my own was Mid-North Insurance Services. Yep.
Right. So that was in 1979. 2 years later, what happened after that? I understand it took another turn.
So John worked with Alan in South British Insurance.
So this is Alan Amber.
Alan Amber. So Alan had been having talks with John. John came to me and he said, I've got this guy I used to work with. He's looking to get out of this business and he wants to be a broker. So he said, I'm thinking of putting him on. So John started off with him as Amber George. John set up a company with him and Alan. I didn't know Alan at the time.
So you must have had a fair amount of clients if you're bringing somebody else on.
Oh, yes, yeah.
How many clients would you have had?
Well, what happened in the 2 years that when I did what I did, when I had to go and rewrite everything, a couple of other people had left companies because it certainly got around what I did doing this type of thing, and some of the other companies were a lot smarter than the one I worked for. They handed them the business because they knew they were going to look after it and in most cases keep it with them, but they knew they were going to build their business as well, and that's how it worked. So Alan came along and bought a parcel of business with him. So it was instant earnings. They didn't have to wait this whole 12 months that I did to try and get established. John formed this company with Alan, which was Amber George. I suppose probably over the course, I met Alan then on a couple of occasions. We started thinking, why don't we put all this together? I mean, why is John, he was the catalyst, I guess he was involved with me. He had his own company when he called to see me. Then he had a partnership with me. Then he had a partnership with Alan. So he's a common denominator amongst all of this. So I remember having a discussion one day and we said, well, why don't we, cost-wise, you've got cost for one company, cost for two, cost for three, put them all together. You've got cost for one company back where you started. So in the end, we then decided, so we put them all together and it was called George McInerney and Amber Insurance. Great big long name when we first started. So it was George McInerney Amber. So to shorten it, that was GMA, and there were some issues we had in those days with a GMAC, which was a finance company. And of course, with the way the laws are scoped, you can't have two companies with the same name, even though it wasn't the same name. It was causing some confusion with people, I think. It's just funny how things happen. We then took over a broker who was called Marshall, Golding and Adam. I can't believe it, MGA. We sat down and we looked at it. Even after we decided we were going to take these people over, they were up for sale and we were going to buy them. But then we realised Marshall, Golding and Adam, MGA, we're GMA. We need to change GMA. So we thought, there it is. It's looking us in the eye, MGA. I voted for it because my name came first.
And it has just exploded. And how long did it take to really get the runs on the board once you
we looked at each other a few times. We looked at it, and I've looked and thought, how did this happen? Like, this is just, and there's a lot of small insurance agencies around the state back in those days. So there's one on the west coast, EPAS, Air Peninsula Assurance Services. There's some guys involved in that we then went and approached them and said, hey, and of course with some of those people, computers were coming into the business, costs were getting higher. A lot of these small agencies were finding it was getting bit beyond their means, I guess. So we went along and promised them the fact that if we take them over, we will do all the backroom stuff. We'll supply the computers. We'll supply all the knowledge, the whole lot. All they've got to do is just go out and do their job and they'll get paid. So we took over EPAS. There was Southeast Insurance Services, another mob. We took over those. There was one in the Riverland. We took over that. And this was just sort of happening every second year. And it was after a few years we sort of looked and thought, my God, this is and we then joined a group called Austbrokers because we were getting to the stage where we were growing in South Australia. We're pretty big, and you need a big connection. And Austbrokers was a group in Sydney that had in those days, about 20 brokers was part of their business. So they didn't take over the brokers. They would take a percentage ownership in those brokers. So they might be 50-50 or 80-20 or whatever. So we sold out 49% to them, not 50. We just sold 49 because we needed the contacts. When you were going to get insurance, and I mean big insurance, the big insurance companies were looking at the big brokers, not the little brokers. So you might be up against a big broker to get some business you might be quoting on, but the big one was to get it. So you had to belong to a big buying group, basically. You'd call Austbrokers a big buying group because they had about 20 brokers. The insurance companies paid them a lot more respect than us, who was just one broker. So we belonged to them. We sold out 49%. We got a lot of money for that, and we were happy, and that's where we still are to these days. But Austbrokers has got bigger. What Austbrokers has done since then is there's a lot of smaller ones that they've had that they don't want to be mucked around with it. They've handed it to us and we bought it.
Oh.
So we've got some benefits out of it that way. So they don't want to be mucked around with the day-to-day running of brokers. They'd rather give it to someone like us. We can do all of that stuff. They just want their percentage ownership in it. We've since also then bought a property management company, Whittles, strata managers. The reason we bought Whittles strata managers is because we know nothing about strata management, but we bought it because we realised that all of those stratas have people living in them. They all take out insurance. That's what our thinking was. So we're going to get volumes
clever.
of clients. So nowadays we've got all these things that they manage the strata, but we also can manage their insurance. So it's been a huge bonus, I
Who
guess.
came up with that idea?
There's a guy that worked for us, old Bill Arnold was our secretary, and he was a wise old man. He was an old man, ex-elders fella. He had some connection with this strata. I don't know who it was. I forget now. The fellow running the strata was a very good mate of his, and they were going to sell out. And old Bill actually came up with the idea that, he said, there's a lot of people in those stratas, and that's when we started to click on what he was getting at. Went from there. It's grown.
Amazing growth story and a successful business. Did you ever get to a time or stage through this growth that got you a bit nervous? Because we hear about companies that grow so fast and they make just poor decisions or they just can't keep up with the growth. Did you ever feel that way? Did you feel that you were in control?
No, I know what you mean. Some people buy for growth only, like just to be big. But every one of those, we did our homework. When we bought these businesses, one of the deals we bought with them is that if we're going to pay a certain amount of money, we would keep those people on for a year, even if they wanted to get out. But a lot of cases, they left people there that wanted to stay on. But part of the deal was at the end of the year, those figures have to still remain, because the danger with ours is if we bought them, then they might go off on their own and take half their friends, their clients with them. So we would make sure there was something written into the contract that the full amount would be paid at the end of 12 months, in some cases 2 years, just depending on what was left or how much business was there. If it had reduced, we would reduce the amount of payment. So we sort of did our homework. We didn't just buy it for growth. We bought it for the business.
It made sense.
Yes, yeah. And we made sure that the money that we were paying for was still there at the end of 2 years, and we would grow the business by then anyway. And they all have. They're all good businesses that we bought.
You have 40 branches.
Yes.
And one in Cambodia. What's the significance of Cambodia?
Yeah, it's funny how things work out. What happens with Cambodia is for many, many years, and also now being a responsible corporate business, we have a portion of our business, 1% of our earnings go to charity. It's a lot of money. One of them we supported was the Sunrise Village in Cambodia. We've been doing that for probably 30-odd years. Geraldine Cox, Big Red they call her in Cambodia. We supported her for a lot of years. Since then, one of the girls who works for us, her brother, has gone to Cambodia and he set up a school. So we're supporting him in a big way these days. So it's interesting that she works for us. Her brother goes to Cambodia. We're already involved in Cambodia supporting the Sunrise Village. So he goes over there to start a school up. He needs support, so we've been supporting him. And
also, isn't there a connection with Tim Siv as well?
Well, he's got New Hope. And then John spent a lot of time over there. He used to go over when he got on the board with Geraldine Cox and the Sunrise Village. He then got to know a few people in Cambodia. He then got awarded Citizen of the Year from the Prime Minister of Cambodia because of the connection with the money that we supply to their schools, what we've done for their kids. We do little vans that pick up the kids off the dumps every day, take them in, shower them, feed them, educate them, take them back to the dumps at night. It's a fascinating country. Little 2-year-old kids in the rubbish dumps, no parents, no family, just 2 years old, looking after themselves. The only friends have got all the other kids scavenging. It's amazing, isn't it? You look at one out here, the kids, the cotton wool here, and they're 2 and 3 years old, and you go there and you see them, flies covered in them. And they're looking for whatever they can to eat, and then they lay down at night. There's no family, no mum, no dad, nothing. When you think of that, it's very sad. It's it really gets to me when I think about that. Anyway.
Did you see that firsthand?
Oh, yes. I mean, but they're the happiest little kids you'd ever see. I wish that every school kid at the high school could be sent to Cambodia. Just send them over for a month. I mean, we get back here and they're saying, oh, my mobile phone doesn't work. These kids haven't got mobile phones, haven't got food. But anyway, so I guess it all eventuated because we then had the guys doing the insurance for the orphanage over there. They were 2 Cambodians, very educated, more educated than any of us. They got to know John pretty well. They then approached him one day and said, how do you operate? How do you work? And how do you do this? How do you do that? We'd like to go out and do something like that. And what we can do, a little bit like MGA, we can take somebody on, a bit like having an electric cord where you just plug somebody in and then all of a sudden they've got all of your facilities to. So we told these guys, we can plug you in, we can process all of your stuff. We get Cambodian girls now doing our processing. It just comes down the line at night and it's done next day. They're getting paid. People say you're exploiting them. We say, no, we're not. We're giving them employment. They don't have jobs otherwise. We brought some of those kids out and put them through uni. And the big thing about them is that they want to learn. They don't muck around at school. It's a right to life. Whatever, education is so important to them. And they don't get a chance to get educated. We're actually picking kids up off the dump, taking them to school, and they sit there all day studying. So we've already got kids that are going out to be doctors and teachers and all this type of thing. It's quite amazing. So that's how it started. These guys wanted a connection. They wanted to do something. So we said, righto, you join us. Again, we'll take a percentage because we're going to supply all the back office stuff. And that's where it started. So we opened an office. We got our Cambodian people running it. And it's going quite successful. But I said, you never know with their government. I mean, they could close it tomorrow. So it's a risk. But we've been going about 5 years and so far so good.
And do you get a fair amount of business over there?
Oh, yes. Yeah. Because it's growing over there. We've probably got in at the right time. What's happening is the Chinese are coming in and they're building stuff. It's rather sad, actually. Where we've got the orphanage down a place called Sanookville, it's a little fishing village. If you went to it, it'd be a bit like going to Port Broughton. Now there's 40 casinos, high-rise casinos, and now the Chinese have pulled out and there's empty casinos. And because what happens is because the Chinese have come in, the poor people who live there can no longer afford anything because everything's prices have gone rocketing, and it's killing the country. It's a sad country, Cambodia, it really is. All the wars they've had, and now they've got these Chinese who don't care. It's a strange story, isn't it?
God.
Yeah. So now you've got all these poor people, and it's interesting. You go there and there's a little hovel where these people live, and next to them there's a 10-story building, and there's
That's empty. That's empty.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
A lot of that kind of stuff going on. Sad.
Are there plans to have offices in other foreign countries?
Originally we were looking, which was, I'm glad we never did, it was Myanmar, because these Cambodian guys that run out, they've got friends in Myanmar who are into the same thing, but Myanmar's just I voted against this entirely because I don't know if you know the history of Myanmar. It's a pretty disgusting place.
It's Burma originally.
Yeah. No, I said I wouldn't have no interest in being involved in taking money out of a country like that or even going there. What they do to their own people is disgraceful. Pulled the can on that. We actually registered an office there and got a license. We could have got one if we wanted to, but we just decided not to. It's probably immoral.
Haven't looked anywhere else?
No.
That's not the direction you really want to go in?
Not really. We're just sort of sitting on Cambodia at the moment because there's so much turmoil that happens over there. It's really, you've got to be pretty careful where in Asia, I think, that you pick on. The big places are already, you go to Singapore, there's 100 brokers there. Go to Hong Kong, it's probably 1,000. But Cambodia is a place no one went to. But at this stage, it'd have to be pretty good to expand. We probably rely on our Cambodian people a fair bit there. If they have an idea, we'll look at it, but it'd have to be good nowadays. It's too dangerous.
Going back to MGA, did you make any mistakes? Were there things that, we shouldn't have done that?
Well, here's another thing. This is something we did way back in the early days. we sort of made a bit of an agreement that if we didn't all agree with something, we didn't do it. Now, John George is probably in our partnership as the entrepreneur. He's the bloke with the ideas. He's really, John races into some things, and where I'm probably more in the business, and probably Alan's a little bit like me, more the people's person. My success mainly was dealing with people and getting the business. I even used to say to John years ago, I'll make the money, you spend it, because buy another business, come back with the ideas. Who can we buy? Who's out there? What's a good idea? So we did sort of make that a bit of an agreement that if we didn't all agree, so sometimes John would come in and say, I got this great idea, and Alan and I'd look at each other and think, no, we don't like it. So if we didn't like it, we didn't do it. And most of the times that we didn't do it, it was the right decision to make, because whoever else did it, it didn't work. And I learnt that from an early age. When I was a kid in Whyalla, there was a German fellow I was working with in the BHP. He was going back to Germany. He wanted to sell his car. He had a beautiful car, and cars were a big deal in those days. You probably gathered it. I said to my father, this bloke selling his car, I want to buy it. And my father in those days said, have you got the money? I said, no. He said, well, how do you think you're going to buy it? I said, I'm going to borrow it from the bank. He said, no, you're not. They're really against borrowing money in those days. Like, it was after the war, I suppose, where you didn't borrow money. He said, no, if you haven't got the money, you can't have it. Well, I remember at the time being devastated. One of my mates bought the car, and I was like, 3 weeks later, the motor blew up. And I've always remembered that from right till today, that some things are meant to be. If I was meant to have it, I would have got it. I wasn't meant to. So I always think now that, if something doesn't go your way, it wasn't meant to be. In that case, I'd be broke still today probably. I never would have bought any of the other things. But yeah, it was only a matter of 3 weeks, and I don't know whether the motor blew up because it was mistreated or misused, or whether it was just ready to blow up. But the thing is that, my father said, you haven't got the money, you can't have it. I didn't really go along with that later on, because the things I got, I didn't have the money. I just figured if it happens, it's meant to be.
From the humble beginnings with the fold-out card table to the successful days of MGA, you guys have come a long way in the last 40 years. What have been the biggest highlights for you with that business?
I guess there's a lot. Business-wise, I think the biggest highlights for me, if people ask me why do I enjoy my job, do I like my job, I say, yeah. They say, what do you love about it? And I always say the conferences, because every conference we have, and we have one every year, means we get to travel somewhere. And that's where Jan and I have both been very lucky. I guess over the years we've been to many places, Canada and Hong Kong and Macau and New Zealand and Spain and England, the whole lot. We've sort of travelled a lot of the world. Jan's come along, and I guess that to me is definitely the highlight. Lucky with MGA, we've got John George's son, our managing director now. We've got Alan Amber's two boys. One works in the strata management and one in insurance. And I got Steve, my son, working in the business. So we've all got our sons working for us. John George has now got one of his grandkids working for us. So it's and we've got girls now, diverting again, but we've got girls working in our company now that have been with us for 30-odd years. Their kids are now working for us, and some of their kids are working for us. So it's an absolute family. Some people say, well, we're a family company. We are a family company.
Literally.
There's no doubt about it, literally. It's quite amazing.
You're now retired from MGA. 2021 was the year. What led to your retirement? Why did you decide to hang up the hat then?
Oh, I think probably in some ways, I guess it's my age. I thought I've got to get out at some stage. If I didn't, I'd just work forever. Sort of like it so much. The thing I love about my job is all the people. I miss, even at the moment I retired, I miss all my clients. I was enjoying it, so I ended up handing over a lot of my business to one of our lads in Port Pirie, Andrew Fleming, and Matt Ward and Liam Bass. I've handed all of my business over to those guys. Everybody who works for us is running their own business within our business. So Matt Ward works for himself. It's his business. We provide all of the back stuff. We provide all of the clients. We provide all of the knowledge. Matt's job is just to get out, service them, look after them, and all he has to supply is a girl to work for him, a car and a phone. The rest of it is he just gets out and does his job. So we've got all of those people that work for us are actually working for themselves. So it's an excellent model. Harder Matt works, the more successful he is.
Do you miss it?
Yes. I don't miss...
You're still on the board though.
Oh, yeah, I'm on the board. I'm going to stay on the board at this stage because I still want to see which direction we're going, where we're going, and I want to have a say in it if we do. They might turn around and do something like, let's open a Myanmar. I want to be there to vote no. It's just things like that. How long I'll keep doing it, I don't know. But John's now 75, Alan's 70, so They haven't retired at 65, so...
I was wondering if they were still there.
Yeah, no, they're still there. So.
What's the future like for MGA?
One of the problems with the way the earth works these days is to get bigger, sometimes you need to be probably bought out by bigger concerns. It's pretty hard to... you get to a certain stage in your growth where it's very, very hard to progress to the next stage because it's got to be a massive move. I mean, MGA is quite large, big enough now that it's not on the radar of a lot of the big insurance companies because we've probably got a little bit too big where they're chasing some of the smaller ones as we did. What I would like to see is MGA to continue in charge of their own destiny. I'd like to see MGA stay as MGA. Somewhere down the line, I've got a feeling that there will be a move made by a bigger insurance company to take over somebody like MGA. But yes, I would like to come back in 20 or 30 years and find out it's still MGA and they're still running their own show.
Thank you, Brian, for sharing your story, and what a career you've had. Congratulations. If you enjoyed Brian's story, please share this episode with your friends and family. A little bit about me: I'm a voice coach, audio memoir producer, and a podcaster. If you'd like to find out more about what I do, I have a website, voiceit.me. I'm Annabelle Homer. Catch you soon for another episode of the Voice It podcast.